to go to. And if they go, this means we put money in the beginning, and once they get IPR, once they get employment, once they grow, then we lose them. And that's, of course, a big issue. Going back to your question, it's not the point of keeping control. I think most of the entrepreneurs are growing wants to leave control, but they don't find the money. And so they stay small.
What about the other elements of the ecosystem, that is laws, regulations, compliance, permits? The impression, again, but this may be not fair, but the overall in Europe, there's a lot of bureaucracy. So you not only have to, have an idea, say, oh, I'm so brilliant, I'm going to do this thing. And yes, I may get some funding, and maybe there is a market for this, but I got to do this and I got to do that. And there's all these licenses and permits and reports and whatever. Does that cause an artificial break, additional artificial break beyond mindset?
Fully, Paul, as I said in one of my slides, regulation kills entrepreneurship. And we are really overregulated. And the overregulation comes from different reasons. But one of the reasons is the whole issue about the green issue, the Green Deal, the green regulations. And we have all these reportings which are so heavy that, in fact, companies say, we don't start because the regulation is too heavy. As I told you, 13,000 new laws in 4 years' time. There's not one company who can comply with it. So we are really in a kind of compliance economy, I call that. And the compliance economy is the opposite of an economy based on entrepreneurship. So yes, I think we should review the regulation. Now we starting, I don't know if you hear, we're starting tomorrow about the omnibus regulation, meaning trying to see all the regulations, can we make them more soft? Can we make them more on a voluntary basis instead of a compulsory basis? And so Europe is really trying to do another kind of regulation revolution, because we see today that economic growth is very low, and that the only way we can save it is through entrepreneurship. And indeed, what we have to do is to have less and less regulation, smart regulation, less bureaucracy, less red tape. So that's one of the issues. And I think, coming back to your earlier question, for me, less regulation is more important than more incubators.
Again, one more point to this at the macro level. There seems to be also an environment of low expectations. I mean, I remember, a person that you know very well, a minister who used to be a minister way back when Sarkozy was president, who came to Washington. This is the time, right at the time of the financial crisis, and things were not good, et cetera, and she, and I guess if I say she knows who she is. And she said, yeah, the economy in France, we're almost at 1% growth. This is really good. And we say, what do you mean this is really good? This is awful. And so that is really, really good. That's an environment of low expectations that does not create the kind of incentives of growth and opportunity, etc. Because if 1%, right now the average in the EU is less than that, right? If I'm not mistaken.
0.8 now.
So again, here in the United States, we used to be on the post-war period, an average was 3%. Not anymore, but last year we went close to, 2.5, 2.6, whatever. Much of it you can say, well, it's government money, stimulus, whatever. But nonetheless, the expectation was that 3% is normal. If you say less than 1% is normal, well, so societal expectations go down accordingly. And you don't create the incentives and the sense of risk and opportunity, because we really want to grow this economy. We're going to boom. What do you say about that? Is that a blanket that discourages people from doing anything because it's less than 1% achievement? That's not much.
You are fully right. And if you see the difference in growth between the United States and Europe, the difference is quite high. It's still 20% if you look GDP by capita, the delta. And what is the reason? The reason is for 28% because we are working less, and for 72% because our productivity is lower. So productivity, and I showed you some figure of innovation, our productivity is lower, so this is linked to efficiency. And indeed, this is what is the driving force. If you see that a country like Germany has a negative growth rate since 2 years, Germany is the motor of Europe. And so this, for me, this is lack of ambition. And that's perhaps what we together, if you look to China, if you speak to China, they say in 25 years, we want to be there with our GDP. We don't have it. We don't have a vision in Europe saying in 25 years, we want to be this part of this share in the world. So we don't have that ambition. We're missing that ambition. And I think that's something we really need. What we need now, I'm pleading myself, and tomorrow I'll give a big speech on the mega, not the MAGA, but make Europe great again and say, what is the vision, what we want, how much industry we want? Do we accept that our industry is leaving? Do we accept that a country like France, for instance, you take the GDP of France, how much of that GDP is linked to industry? Only 12%. So this means that 88% of the economy is based on services or services to services or the public sector. Well, in my view, an economy where only 12% is industry-based is not a sustainable model. So yes, Paolo, we should be more ambitious. We should say that at least 25% of our economy should be industry-driven, and we should focus on a growth perspective and growth objective, which in my view should be at least 3%.
One last point on this. As we all know, there was the Draghi report like last year, the former president of the European Central Bank. There was kind of a wake-up call. We need to do this, and that to become more competitive. What happened? People say, thank you, Mr. Draghi. We appreciate your comment and your advice, and goodbye. That's it? Or did this plant any seeds? Was this a real wake-up call, or just another report that collects dust and nobody cares? And in your
Well, I would say it's one of the wake-up calls, because Draghi, of course, he said, you have too much regulation, that's bad for your economy. Your energy prices are too high, that's bad for the economy. So that's the first wake-up call. The second wake-up call came from transatlantic, with the new president who changes the relations, who is saying we're going to put tariffs. And so these two wake-up calls together makes that Europe says now we should take our objective in our hands. And I feel that now we were before on the Green Deal, everything has to be green. And now we say, no, but we cannot live only from green. We have to go for industry. We have to make things simpler for industry. You have to create more industry. You have to do reshoring. And I think now this wake-up call has been taken seriously. As I said, we are now discussing about how to deregulate. Of course, the word deregulation is not politically correct for the moment. You cannot use it. We try to simplify regulation. That's how it's called officially. But I think the Draghi report, I'm still hopeful for the moment that the Commission is taking it very serious. And the Commission is now proposing, and we are now in the first 100 days of the mandate. That's where you have to take decisions, because it takes 2 to 3 years to implement them. And so decisions is about new energy contracts, energy union, bank union, deregulation. So this is the way that you put Europe back on track. So going back to your question, I don't think that the Draghi report is lost. We use it. The only element which I don't like personally from the Draghi report is saying we should inject another 800 billion in the economy. It's not about money. It's about entrepreneurship. It's about innovation. And the two wake-up calls which I quoted makes that Europe is now really taking it serious and that things happen. So on the same time, you should see that on the geopolitical level, that we see that a lot of European countries are close to populism. Not everybody is in favor of Europe. So this as well shows that Europe has to show that there is a difference, that Europe makes a difference for the quality of the people. And that's in fact what happened. So I believe that Europe has a new elan now, and that I hopefully that all these wake-up calls are taking serious. But I'm quite hopeful for the moment, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we can.
But you have want to put a last point, since we're getting to the end of our time.
Actually, my last question was about a recent statement done by Nicolai Tangen, the boss of Norway's Bank Investment Management, in an interview with the Financial Times in April 2024. Actually, he explained most of it, but I'm quoting, said that Europe is less hardworking, less ambitious, more regulated, and more risk averse than the US, with the gap between the two continents only getting wider in terms of startups. So I was actually going to ask, like, what do you think? Do you think he's right? Or what does this mean for the startups? We actually talked about this, but maybe we can get a few more sentences regarding what you think about this statement.
I think he's right, but it's a bit cliche, and that you always say Europe invents, America innovates, and China imitates. Okay, this is partly true, but at the same time, as I said before, the GDP by capita, so the welfare, it's in Europe lower than the United States. But this is mainly due to productivity. So it is linked to efficiency. It's only for 1/4 linked to we work less, we are less motivated. So that's not the real issue. Secondly, I think that these elements, which are quite reflected as well in the Draghi report, are now a point that we can say we should react. But the gap is not widening. The gap is staying the same. If you go back to some of you might know the strategy of Lisbon, which has been decided in the year 2000, the starting point,
Yes. Yeah.
the starting point was exactly the same. We look at United States, what is the difference GDP per capita? And it was exactly the same figures as now, 25 years later. So nothing happened if you compare both. Now, my personal view, and there you might completely disagree with me, we as Europe should stop by copying China or copying America. We should say, do we have our own model? What is our own model? Our own model is a value-driven economy, an economy based on ethics, an economy that, of course, have to be very ambitious, with people having motivated, but don't copy the others. Don't start by saying this is different GDP by capita with the United States, but say, what do we want as Europe? And if you look to that, we want a Europe where people are happy, where it's quality of life, where there's welfare, because welfare is one of the reasons of happiness, and we should make it easy for starters to start. We should make it easy for scale-up to find money. We should mobilize the pension funds. If we do all that, I think it's much better strategy than always looking to the other parts of the world and seeing what we have to do. On the other hand, we should see that the world is now different than it was 5 years ago. If you say the world, it's global trade, now it's over. It's no longer a global trade. I think America has its own philosophy. China has it. So why should Europe not have its own philosophy and not its growth ambitions? I think we need growth ambitions. Should not be the same, should not be compared to United States or China, but we need to be more ambitious. And again, I think that now these wake-up calls, and I would say that in plural, the different wake-up calls make that Europe has to develop a new strategy, can no longer depend for strategic products on China, and can no longer only look to America if they need money. We should be a bit more self-sufficient.
Well, I guess any last thought? Well, thank you, Rudy. This was really, really a tour de force, as you would say. We appreciate very much your time and your expertise. This is opening our minds to different realities, and for our students and for the audience that has followed us, we really appreciate your time, and we want to have you back. How's that? Maybe in person if you come to Washington anytime soon. But we will have to continue these conversations. After all, as we said at the beginning, no enterprise, no wealth creation, no growth. We're all poor. So this is the driver of capitalism. And as you pointed out to us, there are many different ways of doing it, some more successful than others. And I think you're right when you say Europe should try its own way, not copy China or copy the United States. So
yes, let's do it next time in Washington, and then we don't have the problems with the internet connection.
Okay, yes, that would be a lot easier. Hopefully, we will, we will have our own innovations here to improve our systems and technology. But I'm glad it all worked out. So thank you, Salim, for being with me, doing this together. Thank you, students of Bay Atlantic University. Thank everybody who followed us, on Zoom. Thank you, Rudy, again, and to be continued. Okay, we, as they say here, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Until next time.
Thank you for the organization.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Is it recorded? Only half? Are you serious?
Now, this